pretty much what I did when I got into the multifamily space in upstate New York is I took all that pent up equity from the Brooklyn properties, right? I would just kind of roll it over into the next one. So by my last property, I had just a tremendous amount of equity in it. So I took a HELOC out. I had money saved as well. Took a HELOC out and would buy. Depends on the property, but I bought two of them cash.
Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastriani, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I am your host, Bob Mastriani. Today I have with me Anthony Vander Meer. Anthony is the founder of Brightside Capital, a boutique real estate investment firm in Brooklyn, New York. Since 2005, Anthony has dabbled in real estate, mostly in new construction and live-in flips within the Brooklyn area. In 2019, Anthony set his sights on multifamily investing. His focus is on value-add properties in upstate New York and Massachusetts. Over the past several years, he has purchased and renovated 22 units in his private portfolio, which is now producing $15,000 in monthly cash flow. He's also an active partner in a 13-unit build in Worcester, Massachusetts, along with limited partnerships in Utah and South Carolina. His current portfolio is almost $7 million with limited partnerships and another $12 million worth of real estate. Anthony, thanks so much for being here today.
Good. Thanks for having me, Bob. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. So wanted to go into a few different things. Maybe you could tell a little bit about your story, about how you started in Brooklyn and, what brought you to where you are today, moving into larger multifamily opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off buying, I refer to them as live-in flips. What they really are is new construction. Going back, dating myself, going back 15 years, you would put 5% down on a condo apartment in a swanky area of Brooklyn that was kind of, up and coming. And you'd put that 5% down, you'd wait a year, you'd have yourself an apartment, and they always appraised for 25, 30% more, and that was kind of, that you were getting that little extra cushion for giving the developer some of the money in advance. So we did that on our first primary residence, kept it for just a year, sold it, made a nice chunk, put it into another one, rinsed, repeated, did that again, did it a third time. That's kind of where I'm at now as far as, doing the live-in flips. And I think I'm good. I think I'm done with that part of my life. So about 5 years ago, I purchased a home in upstate New York as kind of a vacation home, just a weekend home. Because I always looked in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn's just a very, very tough market. It's the home of the 4 cap. Everyone's complaining about cap rates now. We always had bad cap rates. So I got a place up there and really, kept had that real estate bug and kept looking. And started my portfolio up there.
So, question for you: with your first few properties, was there a time frame that you were required to live in or hold those properties before you moved to the next one?
No, there was no time restraints. It was just it was a good market at the time, and so you could pretty much the day you owned it. There was actually a few people that I knew in the building who. They were strictly investors. They'd buy 2 and 3 of these at a pop. And the second they actually owned it, they wouldn't wholesale it. They'd own it. They would own it and then put it right back in the market and make not as much as me because, after a year or so, just appreciate it a little more. But they would make a nice little chunk, So, yeah, you could sell these things right away once it was yours.
Nice. So yeah, my first property that my wife and I purchased was new construction, and similarly, right, we put down a certain amount of money, and then by the time the property was built, it was probably about a year later. It was a townhouse, but I'll never forget. We actually had to go. The market was so hot. This is 2004, 2005. By the time we settled on the property, it was 2006. the market was so hot that they actually had an auction with a lottery not an auction, a lottery to give you the ability to buy the house. Like, we showed up on a Saturday morning. I remember my wife got sunburned. It was so like we were preparing for our wedding, and it was eventually going to be a 110 townhouses, but they were only releasing 37, and there were like 90 names in the pot, and but I remember specifically them saying something to the effect of they read some sort of letter off and basically said, these are not for investors, and you're not allowed to sell these properties within a year of purchasing them. And people left. People walked out of the opportunity because I think they were there for exactly what you're saying, right? Put a little bit of money down. The property is going to appraise higher a year from now, and then we'll sell it within a year. So that's why I had to ask that question. Sort of sidebar to that is I spoke to a friend of mine who was doing our attorney review when we did go under contract, and I mentioned that, and he said, that's not legal. He's like, they can't tell you that. Once you buy a house, they can't tell you how long you're allowed to live in it. The finance company can, maybe Fannie Mae or something like that, or FHA can tell you, but the builder can't.
It was probably their way of kind of flushing out the investors a little bit, right?
I think it was, yeah, because like I said, there were close to 100 people there that wanted 37 houses, and it worked. So so now you're in your third property, you're happy there. Talk a little bit about, one of the things that sort of jumped out to me reading your bio, $15,000 in cash flow on your properties. Obviously it took some time to get there, but let's talk a little bit about sort of what it took and how that sort of came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So pretty much what I did when I got into the multifamily space in upstate New York is I took all that pent up equity from the Brooklyn properties, right? I would just kind of roll it over into the next one. So by my last property, I had just a tremendous amount of equity in it. So I took a HELOC out. I had money saved as well. Took a HELOC out and would buy, depends on the property, but I bought two of them cash, right? So I bought an 8-unit cash, a 4-unit cash. As you know, you can always get a little bit of a deal when you can offer cash, if you waive the inspection, So I was getting a better deal. And also, these apartments were, extreme value add. They were, I pretty much have renovated 18 of the 22 apartments that I own, that I have myself, besides the other ones that I have with partners. But so on what I was very focused on cash flow. So I think it equals about close to $600 per door in cash flow, which is somewhat not unheard of, but it's not your average. Your average is about 200 door, right? 150. So for me, I'd renovate well so I could get top dollar for them, and I do have a fair amount of equity in them. Once I do a refi back out of them, I refied out of 2 of them, but I could refi out again because there's a lot of equity in there. But I might not. I really like having that additional cash flow in there. But for me, I bought, the first one I bought was at a 10 cap, believe it or not. It was, it was a 10 unit. And so for me, I really did as much of force appreciation as possible. And really, I run them myself, which is, good and bad. But for me, I'm lean and mean. I got these 22 units and they churn it out. And then obviously the Worcester ones make me a little extra cash too. And I have an Airbnb that I forgot to mention that also makes me a little bit as well. So yeah, it's just really, it's what you focus on is really what you achieve. Some people want that quick pop of selling and getting that cash up front. For me, I'm all about the cash flow. So that's how I was able to boost the cash flow.
That's great. And so I have a question for you that's probably a little self-serving for me, but that's okay. I guess this is partially about me learning and also sharing with others. At the time when you took your HELOC, were you concerned with mortgage rates at the time, the interest rates on your HELOC versus what the properties were bringing back in? What did that look like for you at that time? And then I assume you mentioned refinance. So at some point you refinanced financed out of those and paid the HELOC back, or is that
That's
part of it?
correct. So the longest I held, longest I had a HELOC for was about, I've had the HELOC, you can have a HELOC, you can have it for years and years and years, but
Sure.
when I pulled the money out each time, the longest I'd have it for is 6 months. So I would, purchase it with the HELOC. I'd renovate it with the HELOC and cash. And then within about, 3 to 6 months, I'd refi and pull the money, and put the money back into the HELOC. So this way I pay the HELOC off.
Okay. So you weren't quite as focused on cash flowing to clear what the HELOC payment is, more so worried about, getting the property up and stabilized, renovated, and ready for a really good refi.
Correct. Like now I take on investors, but back then I didn't. So I didn't really have anyone to answer to. So for me, having a property that was even negative cash flow for 3 to 4 months was fine. So I'd buy these properties that really just, they were in rough shape. And so within, going from negative cash flow to, I go to, extreme positive cash flow. I would go to 500 door because I'd pretty much either get everyone out or my 8 unit, which is a great cash flowing building. That was an abandoned building. So for that one, I got to work on the renovations right away. But for that one, there was there was zero cash flow for a good 6 months. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Do you think, I'm looking at some things in the HELOC realm these days, and, we're looking at a certain amount above prime, and we're talking about, significantly higher interest rates. I mean, is a HELOC something you would still mess with these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went to get one out recently, and there was some little issue, and I didn't need it, so I decided against continuing. But I have on my real estate on my commercial real estate properties, I don't have HELOCs, but I have other loans on them as well that are just short-term loans. But that interest on them is 7.5. But for me, it's variable. But if you could, invest that money in 6 months and then pull it back out 6 months, 7% is not, even if it's a few $100,000, it's not that big of a concern to me. And actually the HELOC loans are not much, they're not much higher than the mortgage loans right now, unfortunately. So
right. But payback period is usually shorter, which makes the monthly a little bit more expensive, right?
No, I mean, so they're interest only HELOCs. So you're only paying the interest on it, and you could. I mean, the last HELOC I got was a 5-year term. So technically, if you wanted to, I wouldn't, but you could just keep that money in there for 5 years and only pay the interest on it. But yeah, no. So the payments are actually, the payments are less.
Okay, that's good information.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a great way to get in, but you don't want to stay, because you want to have that long-term debt, right? So if it's a commercial loan at a small bank, you want at least 5 years, hopefully 10. Obviously, when we get to bigger stuff and you get Fannie and Freddie, you're going 25 and 30 years. But yeah, for the HELOC, if you got 6 months, maybe even a little longer, it's a great loan product.
That's great information. Awesome. So so then you have this property, this 13 unit in Worcester, Massachusetts. Talk a little bit about that. You can see me struggle for a second. For a guy from Philly to say the word Worcester when I'm reading Worcester, it's a little.
I can't even say it. You kidding me? Worcester. You need a Worcester. You need a mass accent. But you know what? Let me back up. So I'll kind of tell you before the 13. That was my most recent. So what I did is I started off with a 10 unit actually.
Okay.
So I purchased that upstate New York. That one was just a strict, I put a regular commercial loan on it, 20% down. And then what I did is I kind of left that one alone, right? I didn't really do much to it. I let it ride. It was cash flowing okay at the time. It was cash flowing about 3,000. Then I went over and found the 4 unit. That was the one I paid cash flow with the HELOC. Fixed that one up. That one was cash flowing nicely. Then I moved over to my 8 unit. And then, did the same thing, paid cash for that, fixed it up. And then once the 8 unit and the 4 unit and then the 10 unit were all, they were cash flowing pretty well, I would just take the monthly, the monthly cash flow each month and renovate an apartment out of the 10 unit. So this way, once I got to that, once I finished with the 8 unit, thankfully, I no longer had to keep coming out of pocket, or, going back to the HELOC. So that's the progression of those 22 units. So those are the ones where the bulk of the cash flow is really coming from, because that was like the full concentration. And then, I spoke to our good friend, Matt Damon, who, is Jake and Gino member, and he's been on your podcast, I know, obviously. We were looking at cash flow, but I was always looking at cash flow, but he was also really, saying, well, you got to really look at appreciation as well. So in upstate New York, depreciation's okay. Worcester, believe it or not, great appreciation. So I was looking at, okay, I don't want to just do one, right? I want to be able to have, kind of a two-pronged investment strategy. Have the cash flow, which you kind of need to survive, right? But then you want the appreciation that will really make you wealthy. So we got ourselves a 13 unit up there. That one turned out to be, those numbers are actually the best out of anything in the portfolio. Not so much cash flow wise, but just appreciation wise. It was a 13 unit. Another, I think you can tell my theme, a very beat up building. So 5 of the units were empty. It was pretty much I wouldn't call him an absentee landlord, but an older landlord who didn't care much for the building and just was okay. He bought it 30 years ago and was making okay cash flow. And so we purchased it from him and we're right off to the races. We raised, rents on the apartments we could, renovated the 5 right away. We actually, we were able to get that apartment in 2 months, almost to market rent. So we're about 80% to market. With the next rent bumps in March 1st, will be fully to market. So it's an amazing, it's almost a unicorn to get to. A lot of the listeners who know multifamily know getting to market rents in 3 months, even on a 13 unit, it's very, very difficult. So that apartment came out pretty well, and it was a lot of it had to do with just the 5 units being empty. That was a huge plus. We were able to renovate those, and we were able to get a non-for-profit organization in to take 8 of the units at market rent. So that one was a real it was a home run.
So it's interesting, even just talking about your journey and sort of some of the paths that you've taken. The more recent properties, obviously your approach has changed a little bit, and then talking about this 13 unit and even the 10 unit, right from the beginning, you're not buying at 100% your cash. You're a little more leveraged, and then talking about investors and all of that, which I would assume that probably plays a little bit of part of looking at your return on investment a little bit better too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's great that I've been able to get the cash flow to where it is today, but part of it was ignorance. This is before, it was before I joined this great mentoring group that we're both in. And I thought you do it by yourself, you do it with your own money, and that's it, kind of grow slow, right? And then I got into, a great organization that, kind of taught me that. And I also was realizing at that time too, that you run out of money, right? Like there's only so much of your own capital you can deploy at any given time. So, to sit there and slowly churn out maybe 10 to 12, if you're lucky, 20 units with some owner financing a year, that seemed great to me at the time before I really understood, that if you get some great people on board investment wise, get some great people, other real estate investors for a joint venture, maybe even a syndication down the road, that you can grow much faster. And the cool part is, which I didn't realize, you're also, helping people out. And that's part of the journey, which I never thought I'd really enjoy, which I love, is kind of the, is chatting with the investors, chatting with the other people that put their trust into us, and showing them the returns. When the returns are good, it's a great conversation.
That's great. That's great. Well, continued success to you. I love hearing your stories, and it's really cool to see what you've done so far. And yeah, Matt Damon was on our show, I guess a few weeks back, and I know you guys, we've looked at some of those opportunities together. We
Yep.
did a few accountability pods where we underwrote some deals together. So it's really, really cool to see those things coming to fruition for both of you. So that's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I want to transition over. This is the Healthy Investor Podcast, and I want to talk to you about sort of any healthy habits or routines that you feel contribute to your life and even to your business.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is definitely my wheelhouse. I love. Yeah, I've been healthy for many years. I used to be, a distance runner. Ran a few marathons. Loved it. Unfortunately, the knee kind of decided that I can no longer do that. But for me, currently, I do a few things. I wake up between 5 and 5:45 every morning. I have a gym in the basement, so I go right to the gym. I do at least 3 to 4 days of weights, and then 2 to 3 days of cardio. I actually added on, and I'm sure Bob, you could attest to this. I added on more cardio in the last month, and it's made me feel so much better. Like mentally, I was missing that mental component, that clarity that you get from running, right? So working out's great, weightlifting's great, but it's really that cardio kind of it helps your mind. So for me, it's getting that workout every morning. I actually try to get half a gallon of water in me before 7 o'clock. And then I usually, on a good day, I'll meditate as well for 10 to 20 minutes, which I find is great. Read a little something quick, and then I intermittent fast, which I believe you do as well. Yeah. So get my first meal in at noon, and that, for the most part, those are my habits. I've had a ton of different ones throughout the years. I counted calories for a little while back, even though I wasn't, I didn't need to, but it's just amazing I was on this program. It was called Body by Science. But when you realize not to turn into a nutrition geek, but a corn chip has freaking 7 calories. You can go to a Mexican restaurant and pound 500 calories of corn chips before you even get your meal, So, I think just in the nutrition space, having discipline and then having good knowledge is key, and it helps with everything else. It keeps it keeps you energized throughout the whole day, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you for me personally, I had a little bit of bout of, so I struggle a little bit. I have sciatica, so sometimes lower back pain, leg pain. And I went through a period, and of course it coordinates with the holidays and it's cold outside. And I went through a period where it was really tough for me to get moving. And I've been very good about it the last few weeks. And, you're right. It's like sometimes that run clears my mind. Sometimes that run reminds me of things I wanted to do that maybe I didn't have checked off of the to-do list, or a different way to approach it, or a different way to attack it. That's sort of my favorite thing about cardio, is that I'm getting done work. I'm getting things done, physically, and I'm making myself healthier and making myself feel better. But there's a mental component. I've joked before saying running saves me money on therapy bills, but the truth is that alone time with my head is it's really important to me. And then another thing you touched on that I think is pretty cool. I always consider this to be a little bit of a hack for me, that, I take a big giant thing of water with me to bed every night, and I don't drink most of it throughout the night, right? I may just take a sip. If I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm a little dry, I may take a sip of it. But in the morning, before I ever drink coffee, I drink the rest of that water. And so then it's 16 ounces of water before I even started coffee. And that makes a difference. It makes a difference in how I feel. Makes a difference in, just a lot of different things. I think, hydration is such a key component in so many other things. I mean, I think before I went down this journey, I'm like, man, I must have just been walking around dehydrated all the time, right? It's like
100%.
wake up, drink 2 big giant cups of coffee, and then, lunchtime comes around and maybe I don't feel like having a water, so I'll grab a soda and, maybe a couple beers, and it's like, man, I was never drinking any water. Maybe I was dehydrated the whole time.
Oh, 100%. And that's it. Like once I get to my desk at like 7:30, I still drink my water. But when I have that good, perfect cup of coffee in front of me, I'm going for that coffee way more than the water, So it's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, getting it in before you really start your day, at least part of it, a good chunk of it is the
Any
way to go. And you mentioned drink.
Yep. Oh no, I was going to say,
Wait,
any hacks related to your intermittent fasting that you during your downtime, any little hacks that work for you?
So when I stopped. I haven't, but when I started it, I chew a lot of gum,
Oh, okay.
a lot of So just to give the act, but I no longer have to do that. I kind of got used to the intermittent fasting, but now just water. And I mean, for me, the second I hit midnight, I'm sorry, the second I hit noon, I'm ready to go. So for it's I think it's just not. One hack I really do, which I like, is I kind of almost make it a game. Like, so I do a lot of work in the morning, whether it's my W-2 or real estate work, but I try to get, all right, I'm going to get this much done before I eat. Right.
Hmm.
So then it becomes like, you need to kind of, go through all that work, get it done, focus, don't go online, don't go search for some sort of ski equipment or something. Just focus for those 4 quick hours, and then you get a break, then you get to eat. So I think one of the hacks is kind of, giving yourself that reward after you focus for a good 4 hours.
Okay. All right. Great. Cool. Yeah. The biggest hack that I discovered when I started intermittent fasting probably about 2 years ago is, during your fasting time, you can have water, you can have coffee as long as it's black, and then you can have tea. And I realized that in the evening, I enjoy having some sort of herbal tea. It kind of kills I want something sweet, and it's usually pretty good for you. I've found different ones that have different health benefits to them. So and I found that I enjoy that. And then if there's a time in the evening when I'm kind of craving something 8, 9 o'clock at night and it's almost bedtime, it's like, you know what? I think I'll just make myself a nice herbal tea and don't put any cream and sugar in it or anything like that. And then that usually helps. And then I'm good through the night.
Yeah, I do the tea hack as well. And I also think it's, we've gotten very, maybe not me and you, but, like society's gotten very soft, right? It's so, our cars are, air conditioning, the steering wheel is heated, like everything's just so comfortable. So like the fact that you can go whatever you want to go, 18, 16, 18, 24 hours, if it's longer, of a fast, I feel like it mentally just makes you remember that we're much stronger and much more capable than we think sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's part of, getting outside of your comfort zone and doing those things that are just a little bit more difficult for a short amount of time. Yeah. So I want to transition over into the final segment.
Yeah, 100%.
I asked the same question, same 3 questions of all of our guests. So for you, Anthony, what is your definition of success?
I mean, my definition of success is just continued progress. We all have seen those actors, name it, just people who they've made it. They're successful, and unfortunately, they aren't happy, right? I do think, and I think this is a Tony Robbins thing as well, that I've heard. But continued progress, really, that's where success lies. Like you're never fully made. You have to just keep pushing, keep going forward, and just keep progressing. And to me, that's success.
That's great. Second question. So for someone who's newer to investing or even learning to focus on their goals and their path to success, do you have a good book recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be, the typical, but I think right from the beginning, a great book, got me started is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think if you got a little experience, I think it's a lesser known book, but Crushing It in Commercial Real Estate by Brian Murray. That's a
Hmm.
great book. It really kind of spells out the ABCs of commercial real estate, and how you can do added value and whatnot, and it goes over NOI and all that. So if that's someone who's got a little bit of knowledge but looking to advance it, that's a great one. And then, I mean, for this time right now, Creative Cash by Bill Ham. I read it about a year ago. I'm going to reread it because now this seems to be the time where, Creative Cash and owner financing and leasebacks are that environment looks to be coming. So I want to be ready for it. So that's another good book.
Yeah, great recommendation. So I have not heard of Crushing It in Commercial Real Estate, so I just wrote that one down. Rich Dad Poor Dad, of course, a great starter, and yeah, Bill Ham's book about creative financing is absolutely excellent. I read that on a flight, sort of back and forth on a trip, and then I too think that should be on my list to reread again early this year.
Heck yeah, I agree.
Cool. So before we get into the final question, I just want to thank you for coming on. This has been fun for me. I know we know each other and we've spent some time together, but I definitely learned some new things about you, and you definitely added some value. So I appreciate that. How can we support you, and how can people reach out to you and learn a little bit about you?
Oh, so I mean, I'm on Facebook. It's my full name, Anthony Vander Meer on Facebook. You can look me up there. You can also go to my website. It's just Brightside Capital RE as in real estate. So brightsidecapitalre.com. And then my email address is Anthony at brightsidecapitalre.com as well. So those are the best ways to reach me. You can go on the site, and there's actually a little spot there where you can download a recent deal to check that out, which would be cool. And then, of course, we got me and Matt Damon, who I mentioned, that I have a podcast coming out. It's called The Money Tree Show. It's not out just yet, but it should be out in a few weeks. So, for you listeners, if you got one more in you, don't leave Bob. But if you got one more available in you, please come on board.
Excellent. Excellent. I can't wait until you release it. I'm definitely going to be a subscriber right away. So looking forward to when you release your show, The Money Tree Show.
Thanks, man. You've been a big, you've helped us, as you know. So I really appreciate the help with that. So kind of getting our feet wet.
Of course, of course. So final question, if you could think back with me to a young Anthony, sort of around the ages of 10 to 12, knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to that young Anthony or any pre-teenage child to help them grow towards success?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is too advanced for a 10 to 12-year-old. I hope not, but I think just, working hard plus grit will equal massive success. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I think actually I was diagnosed with a mild form of dyslexia when I was a kid. So for me, school was very difficult, right? But what that diagnosis did was it trained me. It trained my mind at a young age that, like, you got to work hard. Like, life's not easy. It's life is fantastic, but a good life, like a great life, is not supposed to be some sort of cakewalk. You're supposed to really, work hard and grind it out. So I think, just hard work and grit to start off is the start of a great life. And, you know, you know, back to my original point of, having some reading issues when I was younger, I think be confident. Like, so many kids are walking around and adults are, walking around with self-doubt, on their sleeve. You can see it in them, and there's really no reason for it. Self-doubt can be a great motivator. It can definitely push you to do things you didn't think you were going to do. But I think we could all be a little more confident and appreciate ourselves a little more. And then finally, my 10 to 12-year-old self, I definitely concentrate on your goal, but much about it.
Great, great. Well, thanks so much, Anthony. Really appreciate you coming on the show today. This has been a lot of fun for me. Wish you continued success. And, for those who are listening, make sure you check out the Money Tree Show podcast with Anthony Vander Meer and Matt Damon, two friends of mine, great guys who are doing a lot of really, really cool things in real estate. Thanks so much for checking out the Healthy Investor podcast, and go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.